guys, good to see you. I had in mind last time I made a video to try and upload more frequently, and that's what I'm going to try and do. I have a few things I want to talk about, and a few things that I think, I don't know, I've looked into and thought about with regards to religion and faith and difficult questions. I came across a YouTuber called Alex O'Connor, who is an atheist YouTuber. He has a podcast series, I think it's called Within Reason. He interviews people like Richard Dawkins, Peterson, all these kind of big intellectual thinkers of the day, and just debates with people, comes up with different arguments. He's a very interesting guy to listen to. He's very engaging, and I find the things that he says interesting, although I feel like there's also a lot of things that he's getting wrong. Anyway, so let's start off with the problem. One of the big arguments that he comes up with for atheism, which is the problem of animal suffering. And I think the reason why he goes for animal suffering rather than human suffering is because human suffering can often be redeemable. It's very clear to see how someone who's going through cancer diagnosis and recovery and chemotherapy can be treated, can be healed, and can come out the other side of that stronger, more rounded, more ethical, kind person. But he usually, I think, he usually talks about animal suffering in the context of predator and prey, which is an interesting one, because I guess on one hand you could say, well, okay, how is that possibly redeemable? How on earth could the suffering of an animal being eaten alive, how could that possibly be for good? I saw this video he did where he was debating 25 Christians in a big circle. I think it was on Jubilee, and he says, one guy says, oh well, that animal will be rewarded in the afterlife. Essentially, that's what he says. And then Alex says, well, I could punch you in the face and give you $20,000, or I could have just given you $20,000. Now, this is an interesting bit, and I think the thing that Alex doesn't quite get is the whole empathy for God thing. God requires that empathy. It's flipping difficult being God. For many reasons. Let's start with this one. God has a duty to not make his presence too obvious. God has a delicate balancing act in not making the universe in such a way, like I've heard people say before, oh, why doesn't he just write in the sky, God exists, and then I'd just believe in him? But because God isn't coercive, and that would be a coercive thing to do. Equally, he needs to be very careful about how he manages his creation, how creation is set about under the laws that he gives it. And I think two things are important to think here, and I think we need to think about the law of natural selection, which ultimately is what causes suffering. I heard Alex talk in another video with Richard Dawkins about natural selection having suffering inherently built into it. When left alone, how can traits that favour survival not dominate? How can you possibly take your hand away from a living biological system and that not happen? That's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is that, okay, well, back to the coercive thing. If God just created everything like a young earth creationist might think, well, again, that would be coercive, because it's flipping obvious that God did all this, and therefore we have to believe in him, and therefore love isn't a choice. Another thing that I've heard Alex say, another argument of his, is that he's lived with Christian housemates, He has looked into the evidence of the resurrection. He's interviewed countless Christian thinkers, and he's still an atheist. And he says, well, the Christian argument for me still being an atheist would be, well, it's obviously something that I'm doing wrong. It's obviously that I'm not surrendered enough, or that I'm resistant still in some way. And I wouldn't say that God would necessarily say that he's resistant. I would say that God would probably ask him to do a bit better, to try a bit harder. And I think that's something that God is telling all of us. Because there are so many people out there who don't have hope. There's so many people out there who... And yeah, I have literally just said pretty much the argument that Alex says that Christians will say, but it's not quite... I don't quite see eye to eye with him on this, because I think God would say that he needs to up his game. I feel like God would say, almost like when he spoke to Job in Job chapter 40, 41, yeah, I think he would almost say, are you fasting 3 times a week? Are you on your knees begging for revelation? And if you're not, if you're just living a pretty comfortable lifestyle, doing a podcast and entertaining people, thinking about philosophy, looking into all the latest ideas, I feel like God would say, you just need to up your game a bit. And that's probably not what an atheist wants to hear, but sometimes people just need to be left alone to stew and to allow God to prod them and poke them and to challenge them. And ultimately, you know, whether we win or lose a debate against an atheist, you just have to remember that it'll all come to fruition eventually. We are on the right team. We are on the team that will have victory. And yeah, I'm sorry, that's probably not what an atheist watching this wants to hear, but it's probably the reality. And you've got to, at some point, put the arguments away and kind of try harder. Anyway, I hope you guys like the video. Yeah, I just come home from work, that's why I'm wearing a smart shirt, and I just had that on my heart I wanted to share. Also, I turned 30 just the other day, so that's a big change. I was thinking on the day before my birthday, goodness, this is the last day of my 20s, and I was just kind of a bit amazed and thinking about all that had happened in that decade of my life, from 20 to 29 to now 30. I mean, the person I was when I was 19 compared to now is just a very different person, in lots of different ways, and in lots of unexpected ways. Some good, some not so good, but all in all, just continuing to press on, moving forwards in persevering with God, persevering in the faith, and that's one of the most important things. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I hope you guys liked the video. I'd love to hear from you and hear from what you're saying in the comment section. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you're having a good week, and I'll see you guys again shortly. Bye bye.